let's just start. Can't wait. Pak Lendi, can you join us on stage? Ah, there
Hi,
you
Pak Indra.
are, Pak Lendi. So what time is it in Toronto?
So, like, we have 12 hours different. So this is like 10 p.m. in the evening.
All right. So good evening to you, Pak Lendi. 10 event in the evening. Thank you so much for joining us at Asia Corporate Innovation Summit 2020. We really love to learn a lot from you. And you have 35 minutes for presentations, and then it will be followed up by Q&A for about 15 minutes. So, Pak Lendi, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Pak Indra. Okay, so it's a pleasure being here, and it's an honor as well to be able to share some of my thoughts and materials with all of you today. The topic that I choose is about driving innovation and business through the pandemic. So just a bit about myself. I think Pa Indra mentioned a bit before. I'm Indonesian, so I work in Nestle throughout my career. And my journey started from Indonesia with Nestle Indonesia, and then I moved to Switzerland. I'm also had a chance for a stint in Nestle in India. And for the past year, I'm in Nestle Canada. So it's been a few months now, almost a year. So I started in Nestle Canada in March. So it's been a very interesting journey. So I'm hoping to kind of share my perspective. So I lived through the pandemic in Nestle Canada. So I'm handling the Canadian market. So there will be a, let's say, perspective which is kind of specific for North America. There will be some example from Nestle. There will be some example across the industry as well. But I'm hoping, although the exact example is not Indonesia, I'm hoping it can be a bit of, let's say, a reflections or inspiration, or even like sharing in terms of experience, what we've been through in this kind of situation. So this is a bit the outline of the presentation. So I'm going to start with the context, and then kind of like the essence of the session, which is about driving innovation and business through the pandemic, and then a bit on the summary after that. So what about the context, right? I think the main topic of the event is very interesting. So there's this data that I get from McKinsey. It's quite a recent one. It states that most of executives agree that innovating for business will be critical in this pandemic era. So it mentioned that 90% believe that the COVID-19 crisis will fundamentally change the way they do business for the next 5 years. So majority of them, 85%, are concerned that the COVID-19 crisis will have a lasting impact on their customers' needs and wants for the next 5 years. And I couldn't agree more. So when I first arrived in Canada, it was back in March, right? And then like a few weeks after I land, the whole country kind of went into a lockdown. So working from home, you name it, schools closed and retailers closed. So everything seems like change in a very kind of drastic way. So I can kind of link with what they think that things will change. So that's for sure. But then if you look at this other side, on the right-hand side, it's very few feel equipped to face the challenge. So 21% feels like they have the expertise, resource, and commitment to pursue new growth successfully. Only two-thirds of them believe that this will be the most challenging moment. Two-thirds of them believe that this will be the most challenging moment in their executive career. And I guess we can agree that we can kind of link with this situation, right? So it's a statement as well that we're not alone. So everyone thinks that things will change, something needs to be done, but we don't really know how. Now, there's another data as well saying if you look at the dark blue, so that's, let's say, pre-crisis, and then the light blue is today. So this is about a survey in terms of executive who list innovation as their number one or number two priority. So if we connect this to the data previously, most of them think things need to be done. But when it comes to execution, it seems like only pharma and medical supplies industry who kind of react into this and and kind of know how to execute the change. So this is something which is quite interesting, and I think all of us can relate to this. The feel that things are changing, but we don't know yet what to do. Of course, if it's pharma and medical industry, I mean, they're a bit like the core of 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 this kind of pandemic, because this is the industry where, in terms of solution, in terms of let's say consumer behavior change, is kind of reacting more into this kind of space, right? So this is something which is quite interesting as well. Now, this is another data which kind of showing a bit, let's say, the emphasizing the point that I'm making before. So if you look at innovation, merger, organizational health, efficiency, and core of the business, if you look at innovation on the left-hand side, like pre-crisis, they have like 55 points, so it's important. And then B, which is today during the crisis. So at this point in time, the survey was during April 2020. Let's say importance is decreasing, and then let's say at the end of the health crisis or towards the end of the year, they kind of going back up again. So it's kind of, there's a bit of a pattern that in terms of innovation, although people know things will change, consumer behavior change, but most of us, we don't know what to do and how to react into this change. Now, that's kind of the context that I want to set up, right? So it's about, we know change is happening. We know consumer kind of have different behavior, and some of this different behavior, we can say it's here to stay. Now, how we drive our business through this pandemic. Now, I was kind of, let's say, have the thinking about that innovation should be the core, and innovation alone can address this change. But I took a step back, and I think there's a bit of a framework also outside of innovation, which is in the business itself, that we need to address in order to really holistically address the company journey through the pandemic. So luckily, we know the industry has been like changing a lot, right? So of course, if we look at several examples, industry like the technology company performing much better in this kind of crisis because of the nature of the industry, which benefit this kind of, for example, Zoom or Uber or Gojek in Indonesia. But We also see some of the more classical industry in the business performing quite well. So one example is Audi. They focusing on profit, so they recording a great deal of business during this period. The other company that I have as an example is Home Depot, which is, let's say, if I make an example, I mean, this is combination of IKEA and a bit of a grocery and a bit of a retail. So they make the change quite early in the pandemic from pure retail and small online business into curbside pickup and all the adjustment that they make. And of course, we have another example is Nestle, who's doing very well through the pandemic. And just to add a bit more, since I'm in the company as well, I guess one of the key strengths is the diversification of the category. So Nestle is about food, but we have several different kind of food in the category. So for example, we have pet food, we have water, we have coffee in terms of Nespresso, we have Nestle Professional who caters to the restaurant. So if we look at the total Nestle, we have several sectors that's been struggling. So for example, for Nestle Professional who caters the restaurant, right? So this has been, I mean, we have negative growth there. But when we look at some of the business in terms of frozen foods, for example, it's growing up through the roof, right? And then if we look at Nestle Health Science, which sells supplement, and Nestle Nutrition, which sell infant formula, the business has been growing really well as people move from out of home consumption to in-home consumption. And we adjust our business model from, let's say, highly dependence on brick and mortar. We move into a bit more online channel. So we have a record high in online channel growth throughout this pandemic. So we kind of looking at this example, we know that something can be done. So I'm hoping to share a bit with you what I think is some of the key parameters throughout my experience in the past few months in Canada, in terms of what are some of the key actions and what are some of the learnings that I can share, which kind of drive the company to navigate well through the pandemic. So this is what I call the three framework. One is about people, second is business continuity, and third is about purpose. Now, number one is people. So this is, let's say, this is quite basic, right? So we all know that people is the core of the industry. This is the blood and the DNA of any organization. I put there as a headline is transparent flow of information. So although they are the most important, but they're also the first one who, let's say, affected directly by any crisis. So in Nestle, when lockdown start, at least in Canada, the first question that all of us think and all Nestle Canada employees think is, what is the strategy? How will we react? How's the business will perform, right? How's my job? How's my safety net, right? So there's a lot of uncertainty there. Now, one of the best practice that I've seen is, let's say, to promote a transparent flow of information. So for example, on the right-hand side of the slide, I have a few points there that we make when we, let's say, guide our way through the pandemic. Is that, so one is safety. So this is highly contagious. This is like a lot of uncertainty. People are afraid. So first is we need to ensure our employees' safety. So that's one. And we adjust ways of working. And it could be different between the industry, but I think it needs to be guided by what's best for the safety of the employee. So that's already a good first step. And second is in terms of business priority and purpose. So I'll speak about purpose later, but it's important to make sure that the top management understand what is business priority, what we want, and what we don't want. So for example, in Nestle, when 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 the pandemic hit, we know that since we are an essential, let's say, industry categorized by the government of Canada, so we know that the factory needs to keep running. Head office, work from home. And we predict that there will be a spike in terms of in-home consumption, and there will be a drop of out-of-home consumption. So we make a wise decision in terms of business priority, which sector will, let's say, will grow, which sector will not, and we adjust accordingly. One other example is that we want to make sure in terms of stocks on shelf, we want to make sure we are be able to stock our product on shelf, and that's a main priority. And we kind of deprioritize our KPI on stock on hand. So at that time, we make a decision that, hey, we want to make sure our product is on shelf. It's okay if we offer produce. So we kind of took out a bit the KPI on stock on hand, on inventory. It's okay to offer produce. So this is a bit like um, um, business priority that we're making. And then we make a rally behind this kind of ways of working. So we kind of make this statement that now in this time of pandemic, there's a lot of needs to fulfill food and nutrition. So people are rushing to the store to buy, let's say, essential foods, nutritious foods that we produce. So we kind of make a rally inside the company that, hey, now our consumers needs us the most. So let's us go back to work, of course, with safety, with precaution. But what we're doing here is helping millions of our consumers. So this is kind of like adding up a bit of extra motivations that we are working for something, let's say, quite big, right? So it's something with kind of like work with purpose. We address every questions that the employee have. So this is like in the Nestle, we have this intranet portal where people can ask, and then every week we have town hall with the CEO to update the situation in Nestle Canada, to update the situation throughout the country as well, number of people infected, if there's someone from Nestle who's got infected, and so this is a bit, keep the flow of information very transparent. And we make a lot of effort as well in the team, me and my team as well, to let's say replace all the face-to-face interaction that we used to have. So this is one. So it's important for people in the organization to feel confident. I mean, in other industries, sometimes they need to make a tough decision, and I've seen that the earlier this decision is being made, the better the result is, right? So it's important to give a bit of direction, to give a sense of, let's say, certainty for the people in the organization. So that's number one. Number two is about business continuity, right? So in, let's say, normal business situation, change happen at a slower pace. And company that win is company that can adapt into this change. Brand that win is brand that can adapt into this change. Now, in a crisis, I mean, there's a lot of crisis, not only this one. This change happened in a accelerated pace. So in order to respond to that change, in order for the brand, for the company to respond to that change in a short amount of time, in an accelerated pace, we will need resource. So again, it's not realistic, let's say, I mean, we can, to say maintain the status quo and nothing change and try to face it as is. But if the consumer change and we don't change, we will get left behind and we will lose relevance, right? So it's important, I guess, as a business continuity opportunity is to unlock resource, because things change at a accelerated pace and we need to adapt in terms of what you want to do into the future. So point number one is about reassessing where we are now and where we want to go. I give a bit of an example about Nestle in Canada before. So that's what we need to do and make that prioritization. And then we need to unlock resource. I have another slide, which is kind of, this is performance of company. So if you look at the black line, that's S&P 500 company. So this is the top 500 company that's listed in New York Stock Exchange. And if you look at the blue line, is the 50 company, which classified as fast company, most innovative company. So we've seen that throughout the crisis, this is the 2008 crisis, that company that is more, let's say, have more resource in terms of innovation, company who innovate, company who try to adapt to change, perform better than the industry. So this is one kind of like one example of that. Now, how we accelerate innovation? Now, we're quite lucky. We live in the era of connectivity, in the era of digital. I mean, back when in the past, if we want to do a concept testing, we need to, we need to do FGD, we need to go into consumer house directly, and it requires a lot of amount of time. So number one is to take advantage of rapid prototyping and consumer tests through digital survey. You can, let's say, create a concept, test it, compare it with another one, and in a rapid pace, adapt based on the feedback of the consumer. So this is the beauty that we have at this point in time. Now, the second as well is about generational approach, right? So if we look at some of the best innovation in, I don't know, several industry, it takes several steps. So if you look at, for example, Nespresso, we start with launching the Nespresso machine. And at that time, we thought we're going to sell it in store, retail, like normal coffee machine. It sells okay, but we thought we can do better. And then we adapt the route to market. So we need a exclusive boutique. And then we adapt again with new machine. So generational approach is something which is very important in normal time and even more important in, let's say, crisis time. Now, the third, which I found this very, very important. One of the, I love innovation. I mean, most of my role at Nestle is about innovation. And this is, I think, number three is one of the key success criteria. So it's called the 80% perfect rule. I mean, it's not in any, company policy. It's not in any, guidelines anywhere. So this is something very personal. But in order to make a product, in order to make a marketing campaign, usually you need to strive for 80% perfect. Of course, except for quality and safety. So quality and safety need to be 100%. But what's interesting is 20% to reach the rest of the 20%, usually it requires 80% of the time, right? So in this era of fast-paced change, in this era of digital, there's a, let's say, a benefit for us to launch a product fast, 80% perfect. We know directionally it will be accepted by the consumer. We know directionally that the concept is something which is meaningful. We know directionally this is a concept that can make a change. We know directionally this is a concept that is differentiated with the consumer, right? So once we get that, we have, let's say, two options. We can try to make it super perfect and maybe we wait for 1 or 2 more years, or we can launch it, right? Of course, you launch with strategy, route to market, and with all the consideration that you need to have, but then you launch it, right? And then when consumer feedback coming in, you can always improve, you can always adapt, you can always add new product line. But this is important because I've seen many marketeers and many innovators try to, let's say, craft perfection, but then suddenly they're late. So the change already happening. They missed the bus, they missed the train. Someone else made and launched the product already. So this is something important, and especially even more important in the era of kind of crisis where things happens faster. So that's a bit the thought there. So I have a few examples after this. So this is one of my favorite brand. So it's a multivitamin supplement. The brand is Oli. So they know that, so they have a wide range of supplement. So vitamin C, vitamin D, they have DHA, they have probiotics. So they know during the crisis, people are afraid to get sick. And they have lots of anxiety as well. So they change and adapt the positioning and the strategy so that their product put front and center the benefit that consumers are looking for. So this is a simple example. For example, if you look at the right-hand side, it's about immunity. And if you look at the left-hand side, it's about immunity and sleep. So this is kind of, you know, how marketing can address needs, states in a very fast way. So they don't change anything. What's inside? So what's inside is the vitamin, but they put front and center the benefit that consumers are looking for. And they've been performing really well. And this is also like a great example. Another few example as well is we have lots of virtual meeting right now. And if you remember, you know, in the before the whole thing happens, usually you have meeting, you have convention, and then you serve foods, right? So Uber Eats kind of adapt so that people can have vouchers to buy remote lunches in virtual meetings. So we Nestle Canada also kind of adopt this, and it's been really cool, and it's quite good. Another example is Jetblue and United Airlines. They sell airplane tickets, airplane snacks, because they cannot fly. So they sell, let's say, the food that they have and make extra money out of it. Starbucks, they kind of like, Starbucks is about convenience, right? You go to the store and you sit and you enjoy the coffee with nice ambience. They are not equipped at the beginning of the pandemic to cater a lot of number of, let's say, takeout. So they realize this is their weakness, and they change and add drive-through capabilities into most of their stores. So this is a bit of some of the examples that Starbucks do as well. Another example is from Nestle. This is not exactly from the COVID crisis, but this is way back from, if some of you remember, this is from the milk crisis in China. So this is one of my favorite examples. So in Nestle, I work in nutrition. So nutrition is manufacturers of infant formula, growing up milk, so baby food. So this is a very interesting category, which close to my heart, and it's quite a nice story as well. So as a background, Illuma is a infant formula and growing up milk brand that was launched in China just I think 2 years after the milk scandal. And if you look at the slide in the bottom, this is a data from 2018. Like its sales, it reached almost 700 million. So this is only one brand. Sales reaching 700 million in less than 10 years. So this is one of the most, let's say, one of the fastest growing infant formula brand compared to any other infant formula brand in the world. And this is sold at $70. So this is sold at $70 per can. So it's one of the most expensive infant formula. So the insight is that people, because of the milk crisis, so to give you a bit of a background, you can read as well in the article, is that there's a milk crisis in China causing lots numbers of babies, like 300,000 of babies being sick because of contaminated milk. And some of them also sadly died, right? So this is milk which is sourced in China. So at that time, the price of one can of milk is around $30 maximum. So crisis happen, and the insight that we get is that now people don't trust local manufacturing. That's one. And second, people want a guaranteed quality product. So that's second. And then the third is that, like, for these moms, safety of their baby is the most important, and it's very logical, right? I mean, it's even cannot be paid by any money in the world, right? So this is kind of like one of the core essence of human needs, right? So the big insight is that, so one, international manufacturing. So if you look at the product, it's imported from Ireland. So we import the product from Ireland. And then second, if you look some of the ingredients and the benefits, it's amplify quality, it's amplify nutritional needs, it's amplify the best for babies. And the third is price. So this is one insight that is very unique, and I personally learned a lot, but price equals quality, right? So there's like two options how to sell a, let's say, premium product. So you can say, like, for example, in the past, the price is $30. You can say, hey, I sell a product at $35, only $5 more expensive with this kind of quality. Okay, people may believe it, or you can say a product, say that we double the price, and that price difference, $30 to $70, it signifies the quality that we put into the product. And of course, we reinvest, all this price gap that we have into the product itself. And since we get the insight as well that moms, they are okay to pay more as long as they get a great product. This has become one of the most successful, let's say, business case throughout the nutrition industry, at least, from China, one brand which now has been growing a lot. So this is like another example how let's say crisis, how unfortunate event, if we understand the consumer and we, let's say, wants to help them release the tension that they have, meet their need states, there's a chance that we can create something good for the business and for the community as well.
Reminder, Pak Lendi, it's about 5 minutes left for presentations before we go to Q&A.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. So I just have a few more slides, right? So if you look here is in terms of business continuity as well, accelerating innovation. The left side is mature business model. So if you're in a normal situation, or even if you're, let's say, we're a company who let's say quite mature and we don't want to change much, you know, probably within year on year, if you look at the left hand side, we can grow at a normal rate. So normal rate is, I use the value of $1. So we can put any value there, depends on the size of the business, so from 1 to 2 to 3. And then we have an okay margin. We put, let's say, efficient investment and we get a certain amount profit. Now, based on my experience, if you want to launch a cutting innovation, so one is through the example that I showed before, I mean, we need to understand the consumer. We need to create a great product, but that's not enough. We need to be able also to, of course, this is quite logical, kind of communicate what the change is, what's special with the product, right? So usually you start with revenue of one as well, the same. But since you have a innovative product, you have a product that can, let's say, differentiate with the competitor, you have a higher margin. So it's important that you manage your investment so that you start high in the beginning, seed the ground, and then after a few years, you can start to kind of make it a bit neutral, and then reap out the profit. So there's a lot of case, at least for big companies, where you kind of expect too much of a result, start from the beginning, but innovation takes a bit of time. So there needs to be a balance between the time and the investment that we use in order to fuel that innovation. So this is one of the more important slides. Now, the last one, I have a few slides, but I will just kind of talk about it briefly as well, since we're almost at time now. It's about guided by clear purpose, right? So what is the purpose? I think everyone knows. So it's about, you know, what's the brand wants to do in the world, right? So how the brand, how the company want to make change, how the brand or the company want to make a difference to its employee, to the environment, and also to the communities. So every big company, every brand have a purpose, but I think in the time of crisis, it's even more important to kind of reiterate that purpose, right? So I'm not gonna use like lots of example, but when I talked about example from Nestle before, this is one example from Canada. So the government of Canada made a, you know, a campaign when crisis hit to help Canadian business. So use product made in Canada. So we kind of, you know, amplify that message. Hey, we're with you. We're with the government. We're with the Canadians. We amplify the message that our product is proudly prepared in Canada. So that's one simple example. And also internally, we make a rallying cry. So like Mark Snyder is our CEO. We know that in-home consumption and food supply is key in terms of, let's say, helping our consumer. living through this pandemic. So it's kind of a rallying cry for all of us that we're going to the office, we're going to the factory, our sales team going to the retails. It's our duty. It is like our mandate to to do this in order to help millions of people out there. So this is also something which is, if done right, this can give those energy for people who work for the company and also a chance to connect even more with the consumers outside. So last slide. So this is a bit of the summary. So I would say, so always start with the people. So people hate uncertainty. Whatever information, whatever transparency, whatever strategy, whatever questions that they have, try to answer it as fast as possible. So you don't have to, if you're not ready with the answer, it's okay to tell them you don't have the answer right now. But it's important to manage this flow of transparency and communication in order for people to be able to work optimally. And then second, business continuity. So once people is set, then second step, business continuity, make sure the core is correct and define the strategy, what you want to do moving forward. And then the third one is guided by clear purpose. So make sure strategy that we do, make sure our people, make sure the connection with the consumer is something that clearly defined by the purpose of the brand, by the purpose of the company. So that's a bit what I can share today. And I'm just gonna take pause and
Thank
give it
you,
back
Pak
to Pak
Lendi.
Indra.
Excellent presentations. We have a few questions in the chat box, but before reading those questions, I like to ask my questions as well. I've been wondering, Nestle is a large organization. It really exists almost in every country in the world, and Nestle also has huge variety of product portfolios. And then you mentioned earlier that Nestle must adjust the product portfolios, which product that should be sort of like stop producing it or reduce the production volume, and which product are actually should be increased in volumes. And I trust that that kind of decisions would impact a lot in the supply chain and also in the productions. So with that rapid changes in terms of which product should be increased, which should be lowered, and how do you manage the supply chain and the production aspect?
So one thing I think that we all must realize during this kind of crisis is that for most of us, it's something new. So it's okay to say that we don't have all the answer, but we will try to find our kind of best estimate how to manage that, right? So we know through the first few weeks, first 2-3 weeks of the pandemic, that out of home consumption will decrease a lot and in-home consumption will increase a lot. So we adjust our supply chain to let's say reflect this hypothetical change that we feel will happen, right? And of course, along the way, we need to make fine tuning. Yeah, I mean, based on the feedback on the demand, based on our actual sales data. So that's something that we need to change. But I think one of the smartest decision that we made at that time is that we waive the KPI on inventory. So we kind of like choose our battle that our battle right now is providing enough supply. So when we predict in-home consumption will increase, for example, our frozen food business, our beverages, in-home beverages business, we forecast it will increase. And then we increase. And to be on the more safer side, we take more, let's say, aggressive numbers in terms of the numbers of increase that we want to forecast, right? So I think one is try to make educated forecasts. Second, it's okay to be not perfect. And the third, choose our battle. I mean, I imagine if at that time we want to be, let's say, meeting supply, but also we want our inventory to be at the level that we have before the pandemic, we might not reach anything, right? So I think that's a bit perspective
Right.
that I
Speaking
can
about
share.
priority, here's a question by TW Ridwan. Please describe briefly your points of priority to overcome the effect of pandemic in your company.
So I think the context is, I mentioned briefly as well during my presentation, is that change always happen in business, right? Consumer change, there's a new trend coming in. Usually it happens in a, let's say, longer period of time. And during crisis, people are forced to change their behavior. So for example, in COVID, in-home consumption increase, and then people cannot go out so much. So there's a lot of change happens in a shorter period of time. Most of the company, in terms of resource, in terms of P&L, is built based on, let's say, more evolution in terms of change, right? And then usually we have a certain reaction time if we want to kind of adapt to a change. So if you want to change and if you want to adapt from, let's say, normal business situation into crisis business situation, then we need to make, let's say, prioritization. And if we can make that prioritization, we can unlock resource. And this is the resource that we can use to, let's say, make the adaptation, make the change that we want to make into our product, into our brand, into our way of doing business, into our organizational structure. So I think prioritization is even more important in crisis because change happen in a short period of time, change happen in a rapid pace, and we need all the resource we can have in what's matter to adapt to this change.
So you're saying we really need to prioritize, but at the same time, we also need to adapt. So priority can change over time because we need to respond to what's going on outside. Is that correct? Yeah. About that, about responding to the outside reactions. Here's a question by Dandi Kurniadi. Hey, the question is how to accelerate the innovation strategy when everything is going slow outside because of the pandemic. So perhaps not everybody, not all the customers going fast, not all employees are set to work faster during the pandemic because probably some of them has challenges, at home, etc. So have you encountered such problems in Nestle? Whereas there's sort of like, you want to go fast, but the people around you are not really at the same pacing as you are. And how do you handle that?
So that's a very good question. Let me try to answer. So here's, at least based on my experience, and I just want to put it forward that this is something that I, let's say, experienced in North America, right, in Nestle Canada. So I mentioned something about people and transparency. And one of the most important aspect during this pandemic is what we call empathy, right? So in certain cases, in certain aspect, we need to be respectful and we need to acknowledge that people life is affected by the pandemic. And this is something that we need to acknowledge. So in a town hall with the employee, in a question and answer session, in a, let's say, the way we do business, it's important that we acknowledge this. It's important that we might operate at a different speed. So this is important to level set and to be in the same frequency with everyone in the organizations, right? So that's the first step, acknowledgement, and that's what we did in Nestle Canada as well. And then once we're on a level set, I mean, I imagine if you're on a crisis, people are kind of react a bit differently, right? I mean, people say, this is something dangerous. I have elder grandparents in my house, so some people are here, some people are here. So sometimes there's a lot of disconnect. So it's important to have a forum or let's say a portal, or I mean, to kind of level set the whole organizations that we acknowledge there's something happened, things going to change, but at least bring the whole organization into one frequency. It could be slower than what we have before, but that's okay, right? At least everyone is in the same frequency. And then after that, if we look back again at the let's say framework that I explained before, then step by step, gradually, and this kind of step by step gradually, I mean, it doesn't mean slow, but it means in an appropriate time according to the situation, is that we set expectation. So we start from things are changed, things are different, but we can manage through it, right? So this is what we want to do. We want to, at least for Nestle example, we know people need foods and we need to operate our factory. I know this is not going to be easy, but let's get this together for our consumer, for our communities. People need us, and then this is where purpose coming in as well. So I think that's a bit what I experienced and what I found quite effective during this, let's say, unfortunate time. So it's always important, empathy, level set, and then set the bar into a direction that we want to go.
Right. You also mentioned during your presentations that to accelerate innovation, you need to unlock resources, right? So, can you elaborate more about that? Because some companies will say that their resources are limited. Even, in fact, during the pandemic, they are more limited. So, when you say unlock resources at Nestle, what do you mean by that?
So it means making choices, right? So for example, in normal situation, we have 10 priorities and we have everything work normally so that all the 10 priorities can be achieved because we have 100% of the resource and capabilities and let's say operational efficiency. Now, in other companies, unlock resource means, for example, they exit certain business, right? I mean, if you look at the airline industry, some of the unlocked resources means it's a tough decision that they need to do reorganization, but that's unlocked resource because the plane's not flying and the business is not there. So why you keep all this, let's say, idle resource, right? So that's one unfortunate let's say decision that some people or some business have to make just to be stay open and avoid bankruptcy. So for Nestle, we're a food company and we're quite diverse in portfolio, so we don't go that far. So for us, unlock resource means choosing priority. Before we have 10 priority, we remove 5, so we only focus on the most important 5. For example, stock inventory. So we're okay if our stock inventory is a bit higher, that's fine. Second, for example, everyone in the head office work from home, right? So we're saving, let's say, internet and cost in the office. So I think I'm a bit hesitant to get into the details because it might not be relatable to everyone. But I think the key point is based on the new reality, choose your priority. Now, the priority that you don't choose mean you freeze up some resource, right? Now you reinvest that resource into the 5 or 3. I mean, depends on what you think important, and make that work really hard. So that's a bit the mindset, and of course resources are always limited, but if you remove from a few things and add into what's important, there's like incremental resource that you have.
Yeah. So by unlocking resources, you mean allocate resources to where it will benefit most to the customers and the company. Right. I think we have just one more quick answer for this. There's a question. I think it's a good one from Haris Ali Akbar. How fast in Nestle do you launch new products from idea? You have an idea, and then it is approved by the management, and then you launch it. So how long is the whole process?
So Nestle have different industries. Different categories, right? So some categories by design is less regulated. So for example, in the snacks category, it's common to have innovation, in 3 to 6 months, right? Or even faster if you're just changing flavors. So that's kind of the common practice if you're in a less regulated, more, let's say, seasonal based category where flavor and taste is important and you need to make change every now and then. So this can be very fast because the process allows us to do so. And we have also a category that is more regulated, like infant food, for example. We have an ingredient called human milk oligosaccharide, which is, let's say, it's the most abundant component in breast milk. So we've done the research for 8 years, and then we will launch it after 8 years. That's something which is a bit more, let's say, scientific so this is for infant, which is highly sensitive category. So we want to make sure that it's, so I think there's depends on the category and the regulation, but that's kind of like the time frame that we have.
Thank you so much, Pak Lendi, for sharing the experience and insight. I can see from your video, it's quite late there in Toronto. So really appreciate your time. So I believe we learn a lot. I learned a lot, and hopefully we can see each other again and learn some more from you. So thank you again, Pak Lendi, for your time.
It's pleasure.
Thank you. And